is for entertainment and educational purposes only. The opinions of the host are not meant to be taken as medical advice. If you have a health concern, see a doctor immediately. Is for entertainment and educational purposes only. The opinions of the host are not meant to be taken as medical advice. If you have a health concern, see a doctor immediately.
Welcome back to Advices Radio. I'm your host, Scott McNally. And with me today, back on the mic, Coach Trevor and Anthony Hughes. Big Tony Hughes. Guys, how you doing today?
Great, my friend of freedom and pioneer of human evolution.
Doing good, man.
Nice. So we're catching you. You just got in yesterday, correct, to Costa Rica?
Yep, flew in yesterday. Still getting acclimated. Weather here is amazing. We're staying at the Hotel Del Rey, a world-famous hotel, and then we're going to head to Jaco Beach tomorrow.
So what's the purpose down there? Just for fun, or you got business? What's going on?
So I just had the itch to go somewhere different, and I had booked plane tickets for the wrong date because I was doing the zero carb depletion for the bodybuilding contest, and my brain was not functioning. I booked the plane tickets for 2 weeks in the future.
Oh.
So I had to last second buy $1,500 first class one-way ticket to get to the competition right before weigh-ins. And I thought, you know what, we're in Los Angeles and we're on a one-way ticket. Might as well just fly out from here since it's such a main airport. You can fly anywhere in the world. Yeah. And I kind of just thought to myself, where do I feel like going? And Costa Rica sounded good. And then actually one of our fans reached out to us who's a graphic designer for fitness.
Nice.
And he wanted to show me some of his designs, and he's a bodybuilder. So I connected with him, and I was like, hey, we got a connection down there, and I got some other friends that live down here. So there we got Costa Rica on a couple-day notice.
Nice. Well, I think that for tax purposes, that is officially a write-off then.
Yes.
Well, cool. So I'm excited to have both you guys back. And last time we talked to you a lot, Tony, and I only got to hear from Trevor for just a second. So I'm excited to kind of have both you on the line here. You know, Tony, I had said on our previous conversation on the show that to me, you were somewhat of an enigma because, you know, enhancedathlete.com just kind of like came out of nowhere and by storm. You guys were everywhere. Everybody was talking about you guys and the things that you were doing. I got to learn a little bit more about you. And now this is a really cool opportunity that we get a chance to kind of touch base with Trevor and hear the brains behind the operation is what I'm going to call you, man. So thanks for being with us, Trevor. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for that, man. I appreciate it.
So just tell me about yourself. You know, where did you come from and how do you fit into this picture? How did you get into coaching?
Man, it kind of everything just fell into place. I never wanted to do that. I did some side work, personal training, you know, for money and taxes, but that was it. I never thought I would be doing that. And it just so happened that I was a better coach than a bodybuilder. And I say that only because of my genetic factor. The genetics that I have is not really fit for bodybuilding. I can get very big, but insertions and lines and shape, you can't really change.
Yeah. So believe me, I can unfortunately relate 100%.
Yeah. So as a bodybuilder, it wasn't there. But what had happened was I got really deep into it in high school around sophomore.
Okay.
And I was 115 pounds and I started taking a lot of bio and some biochemistry, organic chem stuff while I was in high school. And what happened, I trained for a whole year, my sophomore year, and I put on maybe 10 pounds.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I really got deep into like biochem and things like that, and the stuff required for protein synthesis, you know, the really basic stuff. And it gets a little further than that. But once I knew that, my junior year, I went from about 125 pounds to graduating at 235.
Wow.
And never touched a steroid. And that's where it just set in. The coaching really started towards the end. When I was, you know, around 23, 22, I had really connected with some big guys in the sport that work with a lot of them, they're not really open about it. You know, they don't really come out and talk about what they do and such. And I got really well connected with them through an avenue that I was working, you know, that everyone kind of dealt with at the time. So I got, connected with these guys. And then one after another, I would start getting calls from either them or other coaches that had recommended it. And it would start by just flying over and bagging some guy before a show and helping them out, right? Like, the weekend of a show when they mess up. And then they would start asking me, they would start picking my brain. And they're like, this is what I'm doing. Why didn't it work? What would you have done?
Yeah.
And I would just tell my honest answer. And then it started from there. Then they want to hire me. So I start working with them. Then their friends are asking, well, who's training you if you're not working with, this person anymore? And that's just how it spread. And I asked to keep it, kind of on the down low because of some of the ventures that, you're dealing with at the, at that level and some of the things you have to be around. I didn't want getting out. And unfortunately now I don't really have to do any of that stuff. So it's kind of a good segue now with Enhanced Athlete.
Nice.
But that's pretty much how it started. It just kind of fell into place accidentally.
Nice. What area are you from in the country?
I'm from San Diego, but I'm in Sacramento with Anthony, actually, right? Not too far from him.
Okay, cool. So, out there in California, the Los Angeles Grand Prix just happened. I spoke with Tony maybe, I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, and he said, you know what, I'd love to come on the show, but I'm thinking about starting a prep for a contest that happens in a week from now. And then after that, I saw all sorts of stuff on social media that Tony is doing a 1 week diet for a show. So I got to talk with you guys about this. So this is the Los Angeles Grand Prix, and you walked in and you cleaned up, huh, Tony?
Yeah, first place in my class of heavyweight bodybuilding, and then first place or won the overall across all classes of bodybuilding. So I got the sword and the medal. And the funniest part is that I went there trying to make weight for classic physique.
Okay.
I did weight, and I got thrown in with the heavyweight bodybuilders, which ended up being a good thing. But I'm also told that I would have won the classic physique anyways if I would have battled it out. But I really think it happened for a reason, because I've always been fighting the making weight for classic physique. And it's prevented me from growing and making progress as fast as I wanted to. A lot of fans might watch me and say, well, why isn't he bigger if he does all this stuff? Man, I've got to cut so much weight to compete in classic physique every time on such a short period of time. I lose a lot of muscle. And if you do a prep gently over time, you retain as much muscle as possible. When you crash diet and do the extreme things I do, I have to lose muscle also to make weight. So I was really a blessing to be able to get that affirmation. It boosts my confidence that I am fit to be in the heavyweight bodybuilding scene. At least it's a good start, and now I can actually make some serious progress and use some of the knowledge that I've gained over the last year and a half doing the Enhanced Athlete experiments.
Nice. Well, that kind of leads me to some more questions then. So, you said that, which I totally agree with, if you take your time with a prep and you do it slowly, then you can retain more. Why not have done that in the beginning? What's the idea behind doing these shortcuts and, crashing into the show, outside of the fact that it is very dramatic and everybody wants to see if you're going to fall on your face or make it happen? What is it about that you've liked?
I like the extreme challenge to see if I can put all of my knowledge to the test and do something really extreme and prep in a short period of time. Number one. Number two, I don't have the patience to do something for a long time. I just get bored. It's probably a mental defect that I'd be happier if I didn't have.
Well, at least you can admit it.
Yes. Yeah. And the other part is the fact I'm in Costa Rica is a great example right here. We're staying in a hotel we don't have a kitchen here. We have to eat out 6 meals a day, which means I have to eat things like hamburgers and not so much pizza, but even you order a chicken breast that's covered in butter and cheese. And in foreign countries, if you try to customize your order, you can forget it. They just do not understand customizing an order. So trying to swap out French fries for vegetables, it's not going to happen. So you don't get to really pick or plan your diet. And then traveling, walking around, being able to carry enough drugs to be refrigerated. There's humidity. There's so many factors that make it so challenging. So when I do a prep, I'm going to say, okay, I'll go back to Sacramento and I'll do everything right for 1 week. And I'll commit myself to that 1 week. And the rest of the time, I'm going to be traveling and eating and living a really fun lifestyle.
Okay. Well, and I think too, part of this is, you're not doing a long prep, but you're also not getting out of shape. You're not doing a long off season where you're putting on 30 pounds of fat. I have to imagine that if you were able to come in shape after a week with a crash, I mean, you could only do so much in a week. And I've seen your videos, in between contest time too. You always stay in relatively good shape. So I'm guessing you probably weren't too far off, right?
That's another one of the goals. Yeah. I want to stay in great shape all year round, because for me, it's not about trying to look the best on stage in one moment in time. It's trying to look the best I can all the time. And I don't like that roller coaster. And that's one of the reasons I was trying to research alternatives to the standard steroid cycles of getting totally ripped and stage ready and looking awesome, and then looking like a fat blimp in the off season, like 90% of bodybuilders that I know.
Yeah.
And going through the emotional roller coaster too, of like hating being off gear, or going on a TRT dose and just getting soft. So that's when I started experimenting with the SARMs. So it was something more sustainable, so I could stay on SARMs all year round, stay anabolic, keep me from losing muscle between meals while I'm traveling, help the nutrient partitioning so that when I do eat bad meals, at least more of it's going into my muscles instead of fat, and building a lifestyle around having a good physique, but also having a lifestyle.
Okay. So with this 1 week diet that you had done, how much of a role did Trevor help play in directing what you were doing with nutrition and supplements?
Yeah. So, it really all came down to the last 30 minutes before getting on stage. And I had a means input also. And Trevor learned a lot of his theories from Amin's original works from 20 years ago.
That's right. I remember you saying that. Trevor, I'm a big fan of Amin as well, and I've followed him for a long time. So that struck a chord on my heart when Tony had said that on our previous conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, man. That's he opened me up. I got a hold of his notes from one of my clients, and it really opened me up to kind of, it was basically what I was thinking, just missing a step, overcomplicating stuff. And it really put pieces together. And after that, once I had that, it was more of a mindset, not so much just certain information. It was the mindset that I learned from his notes. And once I got that down, that's when everything started coming, because we still both have different opinions.
Okay.
On things, we don't, almost everything in the end, we come to the same conclusion for the most part. And we have good arguments all the time. They're actually pretty fun. And but the thing is, we still disagree a lot. And he is still doing new theories and all kinds of new stuff. And it's the same with Enhanced Athlete. Maybe not all of them work, but how do you do that? How do you come out with these new ideas and new, evolutions of dieting and drugs and finding a way to combine them? You have to come up with a theory. It's just like the scientific method, you come up with.
Then you got to test it on me.
Yeah. You have to do this and that. So sound really outlandish, and some actually might be, but some of it works out, and nobody else would have thought of that. And it's really a mindset and having a base in some form of biology or, even chemistry. You'll start to understand more.
So Trevor's backstage with me telling me I need to eat this, drink this, don't do this, do that. Just play by play, minute by minute, watching my physique change. And that really made the huge difference, because I posted a video on Enhanced Athlete Instagram where you can see he's rubbing the tanning cream on me, just cleaning up my tan. And I look so soft. I look so flat. There's no muscle definition. And then he's having me pound Rice Krispie treats and Diet Coke. And I don't remember what else we did. It was sodium salt.
What was the issue there, Trevor?
The same mistake everybody makes going into a show. It's the same thing. I've seen it. Every show you'll see at least 20 people look like that. And what it is they do the no carb thing or very low carb, so they're already flat. And then they do this water depletion and diuretic trick. And the whole thing, they reverse everything. And it's funny because a lot of that stuff actually came from Amin. You know, a lot of that came from him way back. You know, they all had their own methods to doing this, but they reverse everything. They do it the exact opposite. And I tell people, just think for yourself. Like, if you hear this online or a coach tells you to do this, don't just listen to it. Think about what's that going to do to your body, because you just deprive yourself of carbohydrates. That's what inflates your muscle. You know, it makes your muscles pop and flare. And when you're soft and there's no carbohydrates, you actually look like you're holding fat when there is no fat.
Sure. So
you deplete carbohydrates, and then you're trying to cut your water out. So how are you going to store carbohydrates to compensate? Because you're trying to super compensate when people are doing this whole carb depletion, carb loading bull crap.
You can swear.
Okay. I got to catch it sometimes. But they'll try and do this, and you know, you have a 10% chance to actually make it work, but no one's even going after the right way of making it work, because they take their water out at the same time, and then they try to fill themselves back out with drugs and carbohydrates, but they're missing there's a mineral balance in your body. Everything has an equilibrium, and there's a mineral balance you have to have in order to store those carbohydrates as glycogen, and water is one of them, sodium's one of them. There's quite a few different factors, and these people don't realize it, so they're carbing up with no water, and they're carbing up on a loop diuretic, so they can't store water, and they're carbing up without the proper electrolytes because they deplete their sodium, thinking that's going to make them super compensate. It's insane. They don't even think about it.
So, Scott, the challenge is that here I am making weight on diuretics and no carbohydrates, starving myself on 1,000 calories a day.
Yeah.
And then I have one night and one early morning to carb up and try and fill out.
Okay, so you weighed in Friday night is what you're telling us for the Saturday show. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the future, I won't have to do that, because if I'm going to compete in heavyweight, I can weigh up to 225 pounds. I weighed in at 202 pounds, probably one of the lightest in my class of heavyweight bodybuilders.
And what's your cutoff for your height in Classic?
Okay, so I'm 5'10", so it's supposed to be 200, so I missed it by 2 pounds. The problem is, and I didn't realize this, when you take diuretics, you shrink also.
Yeah.
And so just a quarter inch. I weighed in at 202, and they measured my height at a quarter inch under 5'10", so I had to weigh 192. So that wasn't going to happen.
Oh man, yeah, no kidding. So when we're talking diuretics, what do you guys prefer? Do you have a go-to diuretic that you think is probably going to be I'll say the safest option? And when I say safest, I don't just mean health, but as far as getting the look that we want.
Yeah, the quick overview, since I discussed this a lot with Trevor and Amin for this prep, was Diazide in general being the best, but also very mild and potentially not strong enough given certain situations. Lasix being the most powerful, but the most dangerous to be done wrong.
Yeah.
And aldactone being only used if someone came in too watery from the specific cause of taking too much drugs. Because that's a DHT blocking drug. So usually, I mean, any prep that Trevor or Amin are going to do with anybody, they're not going to come in on very much drugs on the show. So they're not going to need aldactone usually. But the Diazide, oftentimes a little bit of Diazide definitely on hand. And then for extreme, like high-level bodybuilding, usually injectable Lasix with an IV bag, but that's far beyond what I wanted to get into for this show. I'm not opposed to it. I think it'd be interesting to show the audience how that can be done, but I got to do a longer prep to make it worth that kind of icing on the cake type strategy.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard. I've never used Lasix. I've never needed to. I'm with you guys on the Diazide. That's my choice. I want to step back for just a second. Trevor, you had said a phrase that I thought was really interesting when you said you had looked at Amin's ideas, and the thing that resonated with you that you felt was important that you learned from was to not overcomplicate things. Could you talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean by not overcomplicate things? Because I feel like looking at, especially a lot of the younger guys, that they're going in all these different directions. They have all these different ideas that they want to implement. There's so many moving parts. I'm not sure exactly what you're going to say, but I have a feeling that it would be some information a lot of guys could use to hear.
So everything, when you have all these ideas to cut water, so whatever it's going to be, carbohydrate loading, every single one of those is going to have a reaction.
Yeah.
And there's going to have to be a compensation for that reaction. And so it might be a good idea, but they don't understand what the complications are going to be after they implement it and what steps are going to have to be taken to overcome that. So they start doing these things and not realizing the repercussions of them. And so nothing works out the way they want it to. And when I say overcomplicate, it's the same thing. When you hear somebody, oh, he looks so great a week out from the show, or 2 weeks out from a show. Well, guess what? He was still having carbohydrates. He was drinking a ton of water, so he was pissing all his water out. He had very low levels of the hormones controlling his water, and so all these things, work. And all you would have to do at that point, you just run right into your show, increase your carbohydrates, and take your water out the night before. Let whatever subcutaneous water was under there come back into the muscle with the extra carbs. And what they do is they want to take advantage, and a lot has to do with like Dan Duchaine. And he brought all these really great things into the world with supercompensation, how you can starve a muscle and actually get it to take up 1.5 times or more of water and carbohydrates. And you really will look that much bigger and better. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, the risk outweighs everything else. And if you look good 2 weeks out and you're on a low carb diet and you look contest ready, you control everything in your body, right? So if you cut your water the night before and you've been drinking a lot of water, you can eat as much carbohydrates as you want, because those carbohydrates, you're not going to be able to spill over with that water. You're going to be able to control your body the way you look with the water if you just cruise right into your show. If you were flat, you would just add water. Is it? You don't even have to touch your sodium. You would just add water. You keep eating your carbohydrates. If you're not full enough, you add a little more water. Once you're full, you cut the water out again. And they want to do all these crazy things, and they just don't know the negative repercussions, what's going to happen when they start doing one thing. Everything needs an electrolyte. There's a Krebs cycle that's going on, and they don't understand. It's just, they overcomplicate it to the point where it makes even it complicated for me to even think about.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I feel like where you're coming from is very logical, and that's exactly where I try to stay. Is the less variables you have, the less moving parts you have going on, the less you have to figure out. So I totally agree with you. If you're looking great 2 weeks out, then you probably don't want to change an awful lot, right?
Yeah, it's really it. I mean, once this whole thing started becoming a big trend, like early 90s, that's when you started seeing this crazy drastic changes in bodybuilding towards the late 90s, where guys were just coming in looking horrid. And it happened so fast. They were looking horrid, and now we have all these drugs at our arsenal. We have so much drugs and peptides and research things to our disposal.
Sure.
Yet people look worse and worse and worse. It's never gotten better. Like in the amateur level and some of the pro ranks, but mostly amateur and national level. You get to the pro ranks and you can see a genetic guy now with all those drugs in their arsenal, the difference that it makes from then till the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, on the other hand, I like to throw a really good challenging puzzle to Trevor and look like crap 30 minutes before getting on stage and have him make it very complicated to try and make me look as good as possible in 30 minutes.
I would say that Trevor is pulling his hair out, but I know he shaves his head, so
there ain't no hair to pull out.
Yeah. So, it makes me think. So there's another element to you guys. You guys are experimenters, and you're looking for these new things. So I believe, Trevor, that if you just used the tools that you already had, you could probably get somebody in great shape consistently time and time again. Why keep exploring and experimenting and trying these new things when you can already reach, 100% without them?
Because maybe we can reach 110%. And we haven't found that yet. So, anything that can make anything more effective. And mainly it's me, and I have a really strange drive to kind of want to know everything. And I want to know the best way. And if I could create it's kind of like an art piece to me.
Yeah.
If I had a bodybuilder, and this bodybuilder had no life, and this was his dream, and he wanted to do this, and I can turn this guy into a robot, basically, to do whatever I tell him to do. And I can meticulously put every single experiment I've ever done and had him literally by 30 minutes to an hour doing something, and to see the effects and results that would happen on this person. That's kind of what I aim for, even though it's not even plausible. No one can really do that. That's kind of my thing. I want to know the best way for everything, because, little things like that help people. Just the best way to tell someone to take testosterone. A little change, like just injecting more frequently, but the same dose.
Yeah.
It's something as small as that can have a huge benefit. And, it's little experiments like that where I already have a formula down. If I can get somebody in shape, and once they're low to about 3 or 4% body fat, and that's extreme 4%.
Sure.
By complicating it and looking for things, that's how I found the formula for using a saline with injectable Lasix and insulin and dextrose combination, depending on their body weight. That's how I found that. So if I wouldn't have done that, I would never have figured a way to bring somebody as full as they possibly could with no subcutaneous water. So there's still, I know it's just like science. We don't, or space, we don't know what's outside, but we know there's something there that we can find. So to me, I know there's a secret, and there's going to be something, and maybe I find it accidentally by doing an experiment. And the biggest thing I'm into is just genetics. I'm find more genetically. That's how I've always looked, because everyone's done steroids. You can't change it.
Yeah.
So it comes into genetics, and that's where I really took interest in years ago. So I'm still kind of there.
So Scott, meanwhile, what we're dealing with here in Costa Rica, the type of things we're dealing with is my girl Sky just brought in 2 hot South American hookers into our room just now, and she's telling me they want to party with us. And we're telling them to get out because we're trying to pioneer human evolution here.
Well, I'm trying to focus here. I'm trying to get my attention back. And Trevor, eyes on the phone.
He was good. He was focused. I was impressed.
I actually didn't even know they were at the door.
They're standing right behind us.
Here's the thing that I'm thinking too, and I've thought about you guys on and off for a while now. I've been watching a lot of your videos, and I hear a lot of the feedback, and I think that there's a lot of mixed stuff, that there's some people that really love you guys and some people that are really against what you're doing. And I guess what I'm seeing is, and it's especially the younger guys, the new guys, the guys that still want to experiment and discover new things, that I feel like those are the guys that are gravitating towards you the most. It's the older generation maybe that has found that formula that aren't necessarily as interested in. At least that's the vibe I get.
I'll tell you actually a really good example of that. It's that saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with me. I have a formula. I have lots of formulas, and when people bring something else to me, I'm like, okay, that sounds good and all. They might have this idea because science said this or that. And I'm like, well, I'm still going to do it my way because I know it works, and I'm just going to do that. And just the other day, or yesterday, little things like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I always take Viagra before a workout. It's just something I do. I at least try to do. And taking the Levitra yesterday, I kind of get hesitant. I'm like, I'd rather just do the Viagra because I know it works.
Right.
And I take the Levitra instead. And it turns out the Levitra is now my favorite thing to take. But I would have told anybody else, just take Viagra. Just take Viagra. Don't take Levitra.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, you're going to get irritated at people. But if you open your mind up, you would be amazed at how far you can go and how much you can learn.
Right on. I was going to ask this question later, but I feel like it just fits in here perfectly now. With any experiment, of course, there's going to be successes, but of course there's going to be failures too. We've heard a lot about the things that have been successful. Can you give me an anecdote or a story of something you guys had tried that just didn't pan out the way you expected it to?
Yeah. There's, God, I could probably hundreds.
Yeah.
Let's take years off my life. Yeah. I mean, let me tell you one, and I think this is maybe a more common one that people can relate to. But if you've ever heard of PGCL,
Oh yeah.
so you know the way that those things are supposed to work. It's supposed to work as a PGF and as a fat burner, and it kills gyno, and it's used to induce labor in elephants. It's only used in humans, and it's for freaking elephants.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, this dose does this. I'm gonna try triple, quadruple. I'm gonna do this for weeks on end, and then I ended up getting just dehydrated and sick. My whole body hurt because you're just losing water through your bowels, basically.
Okay.
And there's so many crazy claims, and if you look at the literature on paper of like PGFs and things, things like that, PGs, all those different ones, they look so incredible on paper. Increased protein synthesis, the inflammation, all these different things will create anabolism and cell growth, and there's so much positive stuff. And then I take this, and it does the exact opposite. I couldn't train. I lost 15 pounds. It made my gyno worse at the time. The inflammation hurt so bad I couldn't even lift the weight in that muscle. And so it was just one of the biggest failed experiments, but the literature behind it was just incredible. It was amazing. So you'll get things on paper, and a lot of supplements and a lot of things you can buy over the counter, natural or amino acids on paper. It's incredible. And one of the things is like carnitine. On paper, it's the most incredible thing. And when you take it the way most people take it, it's ineffective. But then you have to go deeper into the science and figure out why is it ineffective and then how to make it effective. And it turns out to be one of the best things you could take, and it's just an amino acid. And so that was a big failure. I can tell you 1,000 chemistry failures I've had with different products and things like that. But that maybe on another day.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'm sure everybody can probably relate to something along those lines too. To get back to the positive, though, somebody had actually written in, one of the listeners, they asked about injectable L-carnitine and what your thoughts were.
So I was just doing injectable carnitine for that week for the prep.
Oh, nice.
And I was using the Synthetech. It's 200 milligrams per ml.
Okay.
And which I understand is a low dosage for injectable carnitine. Well, the problem is you have to inject so much of it. So I was injecting. First, I did a couple cc's, and the next day 3 cc's, and the next day 5 cc's, and the next day 6 cc's.
Yeah.
So that's 1,200. It's a lot to inject. It's water based, so it goes in smooth and doesn't make a knot or anything. But it's just a lot to. It's just a lot of liquid to inject. So I asked Trevor. We've always wanted to have an injectable carnitine because I understand the science behind it now, and Trevor does believe in it, and I'll talk about it. But I wanted to get the concentration up as high as possible, and Trevor's working on how high he can get that concentration.
Nice.
So I can inject like 500 milligrams per cc and just inject 2 cc's a day.
That'd be beautiful.
But I think it's a more of a long-term. Whenever Trevor's talking about it, he's talking about loading your carnitine stores, not like it's an immediate effect. And even with the studies that he's shown me on it, the best studies are the ones that were run more long-term and allowing the stores to really build up. And then it has the ability to store more carbs, the potential sensitization of androgen receptors or creation of androgen receptors, which is a smaller part of it. And then also the burning more fat, shuttling the fat into the mitochondria. So for me, it would be a nice alternative to DNP because that's what I usually rely on. But this would be an even better, more long-term solution because my problem with DNP is I don't like going flat. But with carnitine, I might actually fill up more while still burning fat. I'll let Trevor talk about that, though.
Yeah, so the carnitine, the thing is you want to build up muscle concentration of carnitine, in the muscle. And there's no way when you're doing this orally, then why would taking carnitine do anything when there's so much carnitine in a chicken breast or a steak? It makes no sense, right? And so one of the things, what it does, like you said, there is the big thing I like about it, same with the vitamin D and such, is the androgen receptor upregulation and things like that. That's a really big advancement and trick you can do. But the thing is, it's not that it just increases fat burning. It's the rate at which you can burn fat and break down fatty acids and transport them. Most people fail to realize when you're taking DNP and then you add a T3, then you add Clen, and then you add 2 hours of cardio, you physically cannot break down and transport that much fat for energy.
So what happens instead is your energy levels crash because you can't get enough fuel from fat, and then things like carnitine become a limiting factor.
Yeah, so you have to break down your own tissue into glucose because it's easier and it's much faster. So your body will convert your protein into glucose for energy, and that's why you will stay the same condition and lose fat. You won't lose fat; you lose muscle and keep the fat.
Okay.
And carnitine will reverse this because it can upregulate the speed at which you can actually break fat down. And so by adding that to something like DNP or T3, you're going to get more fat burning. It's like almost like adding growth hormone. You would get a lot more fat burning quicker when you're adding these other drugs as opposed to losing muscle. And then the problem with it is when you're talking especially carnitine to increase muscle concentration requires a couple things. It requires energy. Everything requires energy. That's what people mess up with anything in the human body.
Okay.
To transport anything, to do anything with an amino acid, I mean, even electrolytes, it needs energy. And there's a whole process and a whole cycle to increase energy that requires energy, And so it needs energy, and then it needs a delivery system. And so if you don't have these present, carnitine is useless. Even injectable carnitine is useless. And so these energy, there's,
Well, the studies show that if you take like 5 grams a day for 2 months straight, that at the end of 2 months, then there is some advantage, right?
There's
orally without taking insulin.
No. So, the thing is, insulin would be your transporter. And what he's saying is by doing you would eat roughly, the studies were showing around 100 grams of dextrose. So what that's doing is it's a precursor to the transport system insulin.
Okay.
And so by doing for over 3 months of every day eating or drinking 100 grams of dextrose with all your carnitine, you increase stores roughly around, it was less than either 13 or 10%, I can't remember exactly. And so super low number. And by doing it effectively, if you add the energy system, give it the energy that it needs, which is one, the vitamin Bs, the 12, and then specifically the what everyone doesn't know is the ATP. ATP is the energy to do this. And especially after a workout, when you can uptake more carnitine and insulin and get even higher concentrations, if you're already depleted in ATP. So by adding the ATP and the Bs, you have the energy to make it work for the transporter. And when doing it with the insulin, you're increasing it well over 20%. And then you take advantage of super compensation post-workout, giving it all the nutrients it needs. Now you can increase that further and get that much more out of it.
Interesting. So how long would you suggest somebody were to run a program like this?
Well, with the carnitine, so far, it's only going to be based on somebody's tolerance with insulin. At that point, I would tell somebody I would run it theoretically indefinitely because there's only benefits to it.
I see.
However, the benefits to side effects of insulin is different.
I see.
You don't want to run insulin for the rest of your life, so there would be cycles you would want to do. But at the same time, if you're eating a very good diet and you're doing controls on your diet and you're doing cardio and training, doing 6 units of insulin post-workout like a Humalog or a Novolog is going to have almost zero effect on anything internally, endogenously, and affecting insulin sensitivity. That's all could be reversed.
Interesting.
So kind of 50-50 there.
So what I understand too, on the topic of insulin, you guys are into the idea of low or micro dosing of insulin instead of taking like a big bolus, once a day.
Yeah, because you can only store so much carbohydrates. What's the point? It's all it's really doing, keeping you anabolic, and by anabolic, it's to every tissue, so including fat. The more insulin insensitivity you have, the fatter you're going to be. So the more insulin you do, the longer you do it, the more fat you're going to be putting on, and the worse it's going to be for you. Right. And so that is the only reason insulin should be used is to put you in an anabolic state if you really need it, and two, with your growth hormone and delivery systems. It's used for delivery systems. That's why you would use certain doses of insulin at certain times. This whole thing about taking 10, 15 units, 20 units just to fill out is ridiculous. I mean, it's insane. It's just...
I mean, but we since we talk to so many people, we do have athletes that take 10 units post-workout with good success and not putting on any fat. But then we've also come across a lot of people that were doing 10 units post-workout and were putting on a lot of fat too. So it really, insulin is something that really seems to depend on the person. Yeah. But it's a thing where Trevor will start someone on the really low dosage and then go from there if it's not working.
If you're not on growth hormone, you really have to be in the right environment to use it for that compensation effect of glycogen. And the only reason is if you want to do very long workouts and do more like running marathon type training, that's the only reason it's going to do anything.
You use it as an anti-catabolic, actually, Trevor. Right?
For cardio, yeah.
That makes sense. What are your thoughts on the super long-acting insulin, something that you might take a small dose of that would then, trickle release like a Lantus or something over a 24-hour period?
And see, that's the thing. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And it's the same thing that I need to do more into is because I would rather use a Humalog or a Humulin R.
Because it's what you know.
It's because it's what I know, gotcha. And I can effectively utilize that. I would have to relearn the Lantus peaking effects, and there's times you just don't want it, and then at the same time it works at such a low function that you can not have sugar and still be okay. So then, what's the point of having it? It's this whole 50-50. I'd have to go through and relearn this whole thing.
But there are times when you'd consider having someone use a Lantus. Like, what if they had a really fast metabolism, they can't put on weight? Then maybe something in a situation like that, or also you're trying to get him into keto. But really
that's
fast.
The thing, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. There's applications, and when I was telling you earlier, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Mindset that you have. Yeah. That's the only reason I haven't been doing that, and there could be a more effective way with it, but there's so much other things that I'm looking into than that. Because if you were to use it for somebody with a really fast metabolism, you're going to have to take a lot more of it. And then what are you going to do when they're not having nutrients? Because they're going to burn through glucose so fast. And even in their sleep, they burn glucose, and you're having to take more and more of this stuff. But I do believe there's an effective way to use it with other insulins too. It's one of those things that I'd have to put in a lot of time to do. And there's a lot of other things. Sure.
There's only so much time in the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you guys spoke to Colette Nelson at all? I had her on the show a little while back, and she's an advocate of what we're talking about, low-dosing insulin, and she is a proponent of using Lantus. I know that her and Amin have a lot of similar ideas about insulin use.
Yeah, so I don't know her personally, and I've never talked to her. I've actually seen a short clip of her videos, and I know nothing of her personally. I just know a lot of people, or actually I'll say a handful of people that know her, and the things that they said, and like I said, it's just rumors because I have no idea who she is personally, but just saying that it's just her trying to sell insulin and market insulin because of the way she can get it. So that's all I've ever heard, so I cannot even comment on it.
I'll send you a link to that episode. She had some good stuff to say that had made some sense, and I've done a little bit of experimenting with the longer acting insulin. It's something I too, though, I've leaned towards what I always know. Plus, I like the control of being able to put it in exactly at the time I want to put it in.
It's like doing an edible, marijuana versus It's like, if something happens 12 hours from now, you want to be able to function. And it's the same thing. Maybe you wanted to go to a party that night, and now you're like, oh God, I'm on insulin and I'm gonna have to watch this.
The way she explained it is that if you were to take a 24-hour insulin, and let's say you take 10 units, that'll be the equivalent of like a half a unit releasing every hour, so that you could effectively go to sleep and for 8 hours and not have any issue, because that's something I wasn't quite sure about.
It's really smart too when you think about how such of a low dose it would be and how much healthier that would seem. But as we know in drugs, when you start learning drug interactions and things, any single drug that has a longer half-life, any drug that is like even oxycodone, extended release, any of these drugs have the worst desensitization drugs and a lot of negative repercussions.
That's a good
with
point.
Side effects. So you have to take that into account and then do the experiments personally too, and do it. So like I said, I just have not done it, so I couldn't comment really either way.
All right, on. So, hey, Tony, what role did DMP play in this recent contest prep?
All right, so I was actually preparing for the Governor's Cup in Sacramento, and I was going to start that like 10 days out. And I used DNP to get myself down from DNP and crash dieting to get myself down from 230 pounds to 212 pounds. So the 400 milligrams a day for 3 days in a row got me down to the 212. And then what happened is I got back to Sacramento. I did an experiment with injections. I got really ill. I couldn't work out. I'm still recovering. And then I called off the whole show, and I went back to my normal diet. I would pigged out on cereal and ice cream and the whole thing to just try and feel better. And then decided to do the Grand Prix the Monday before the Saturday on the show, and then got on a diet and cut down and prepped for it. So the DMP played a role in the first part of getting my weight down and burning a whole bunch of fat really fast. And I did the DMP with the cardio, with all kinds of other fat burners, the Enhanced Athlete Code Red Fat Burner, the Fat Burning Cream, the Yohimbine, all these things to help release the fat to help the DMP burn it, and the T4. I was at that point I was doing T4. I didn't introduce T3 until closer to the end.
Okay. We had a bunch of DMP questions too. Some stuff came up a couple of weeks ago on one of our other programs here at the Advices Radio Network, Blood, Sweat, and Gear. We were talking about the differences between crystal DMP and the powdered DMP. It's something that I'm not super familiar with. I've only had very limited personal experience with DMP. I used the powder, and I used it once. Now, I have a friend of mine that has access to a bunch of Enhanced Athlete DMP, but from what I understand, this might be an older batch because I believe that it's powdered DMP. Could you guys talk a little bit about the difference between the two and what Enhanced Athlete currently has?
Yeah, when Enhanced Athlete first started selling DMP, it was 250 milligram powder capsules. Okay. And it was kicking everybody's ass. I mean, everybody loved it. And at the same time, they were like, some people could take just one capsule and they're like, this is too much heat. It seems to be that people's reaction to it varies a lot. The dosage is standardized. I know it's not the dosage. I think it has to do with how many mitochondria the person has, their body size, how much muscle they have, what their glycogen stores are, who knows. So I was afraid people are going to take it an overdose, and then I also had a ton of people requesting that the capsule sizes be smaller, and then I also wanted to be able to do shorter blast cycles. So I switched to crystal because it has a shorter half-life, so it could be faster blast cycles, and it could be out of my system faster. And then also to reduce the risk that if a human were to ingest it, because this is not for human consumption, this is a toxic deadly fertilizer. If a human were to consume it, usually the reason why people would overdose is they don't overdose on day one, they overdose on day 3 when it accumulates in the body and it has a longer half-life. Well, the crystal has a shorter half-life, so that lowers the risk of an overdose by the accumulation effect. Then switch to 50 milligram tablets, because then in order to overdose, someone would have to take a handful of tablets.
There you go.
Which just looks stupid. So it's kind of a protection thing against human consumption. And females wanted to run 100 milligrams a day. And so instead of either breaking a capsule open or taking a capsule every other day, or 2 days on or 2 days off, 1 day on, then my female friends could run the tablets. The problem is a lot of people were complaining because they're like, I used to take a 250 milligram capsule of Enhanced Athlete DMP and it would kick my ass. And now I take 250 milligrams of these tablets and I don't even feel it. Well, I don't know what the exact percentage difference in, but Trevor thinks it's about 75%. That crystal by weight is 75%. Well, it's 75% as strong as the powder, because 25% of it is taken up by the sodium attached to it. Salt. salt ion.
It's like amphetamine salt.
Like amphetamine salts. It's the way it's made.
So
the only thing that changes is the dosages. So if I used to take 250 milligrams of powder, then maybe now I'll take 300 or 350 of crystal. But then the prices of the DMP, I dropped it much lower, so the price didn't actually change. It's just now it's more tablets of a lower dosage, and I don't think the other problem I've got is I did the video about if you light your DMP on fire and it explodes, then it's real because DMP is explosive. Well, in order to get the 50 milligram tablets to stick together, there's got to be binders and fillers in it.
Sure.
Binders and fillers act as kind of a fire suppressant, so they don't catch on fire anymore. Not to mention the sodium prevents it from catching on fire. So a crystal DMP tablet with binders and fillers does not any longer catch on fire. So someone may go watch the old video of me lighting the powder capsules on fire and wonder why these tablets don't light on fire.
Interesting. So, you're talking about dosing that the women were, wanting to run 100, and you're talking people are taking 250. This stuff is all lower than the dosing I had heard several years ago, in different DMP threads that were floating around the internet. What do you think, Trevor, is a good effective dose to work with in something like this? I'm assuming it's much lower than the high end stuff we used to talk about.
Yeah, so it's what I would say is just like if I did a contest prep, I would only be there if somebody was lacking in a contest prep. I always believed in just doing it the same way over and over, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Because you can actually control a lot. There's, like I said, there's reactions to everything you take. There's a reaction to DMP and a rebound to DMP. Not that it's a negative rebound, but just another control, a variable that's outside your control that now you have to go fix. So it would be something that they were lacking in a competition prep. Now, if it was a fat loss thing, my favorite way to have somebody do it is a lower dose for a longer period of time because, one, the side effects aren't too bad and they're not dying if they're in an inside job or doing school.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect supplementation to the diet. So it's like, for a fact that you're going to lose, if you stayed true to just your normal diet, you're going to lose, maybe 2-3 pounds a week just by adding that. And if you were to do more and more, what happens is it turns into the crash dieting kind of deal where you're going to be so extremely hungry and lethargic that it's going to interfere with your weight training.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you lose definition, you lose the shape of the muscle, you go flat and then trying to refill back out. It actually takes a long time to fill back out and get those lines to really show. And then you're dealing with all that excess water retention and things like that from filling out. So it would be, I would say around 200 to as high as 400 being the max, but usually 200-300, probably 250-300 being the best.
And at that dosage, a lot of some people feel it a lot, and some people don't feel it at all. They're not even sure if it's working at that dosage.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that, like you said, a part of it is how many mitochondria, and it's really kind of comes into how effective your mitochondria is and your body is with your mitochondria. So that is a big thing. That's why the dose always ranges on people. And but I would say about 200-300 being the best, maybe 400 depending on the person, and adding that in. Now, if they had a photo shoot in a week, then something like I did, I would not recommend the same dose, but doing a higher dose of 800-700 milligrams.
Whoa.
For that 5 days, and then you're ready for your show right after it's out of your system, and you add the carbs in, you're going to be swollen with really, if you do it right, with very little subcutaneous water to deal with, and you could do a photo shoot in a week. And so it's a great way to drop 20 pounds in a week and go do your photo shoot filled out.
Okay. One of the things that recently came up on Blood, Sweat, and Gear was debating whether or not we need to adjust our carbohydrates and fats specifically with the use of DMP, or whether you can just keep the carbs high. I know that when I had experimented with it, the more carbs I ate, the hotter I felt. But I don't know if that was necessarily beneficial, just feeling more side effects. What are your thoughts, guys?
I'll give you my quick feedback based on the last competition prep I did. When I did 400 milligrams per day, I cut out all carbohydrates. And so I was able to drop, what is that? How many pounds? 15 pounds in like 5 days or something.
Wow.
Yeah. So for a very short blast, going no carbohydrates will drop a lot more weight. And it's not just the carb depletion. It's that it basically gets you into ketosis really fast because you've depleted your carbs within a day or two. And then you're running off of just fat, and you get to the fat burning zone much faster. And then I'll let Coach Trevor add to this, but in general, what I'm hearing from Coach Trevor is to keep just a normal diet and just add the DNP on top of the normal, like a good diet, a good fat loss diet with a slight caloric deficit, the kind of diet everybody recommends for losing fat, and just add the DNP on top of it and not overcomplicate it. But I'll let Trevor add to that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just like you said, that, instead of cutting more food out in your diet, adding more cardio, you would just add the DNP.
But keeping the carbs in because you keep the metabolism up.
And then, and it's funny too, the way even both of us, the opinions always change. And we did that video in Mexico where we had a debate on what was better, lower carbs, lower fat, higher fat on DNP. And at the time, they really liked the lower carbs for DNP. And I was saying, well, I think it's the exact opposite. You do need the carbohydrates. And the reason for this is because with the carbohydrates, you get so lethargic on DNP, but with the carbs in your system, you at least still have muscle function. When you get rid of the carbohydrates, you're still going to be tired whether you have them or not. It is more extreme without, but muscle function. You have muscle function, and you can still have the ability to perform in the gym. And if anybody knows about bringing in definition and looking your best, it is better to get in shape through the gym and through pushing yourself with weights than it is with cardio and letting your weights take a hit because of your diet and cardio. And it's the same concept with DNP. So I do believe if it's in a low dose, it just is a staple. You just add on top of it before you start changing things. And then if you were to do a type of diet, I would say keep the carbohydrates in there for sure, because you're going to start compensating and your weights will go down, and eventually your muscle definition and quality will go away.
That makes sense. So, kind of back to the beginning where we started, Costa Rica. We just got done with this contest. You guys are there. Tony admitted he can't get all of his diet foods there. I got to know, man, how much weight have you rebounded coming off the show, flying, and now eating all this great Costa Rican food?
I don't trust these manual scales that have calibrated down here. I've got to look at the mirror. If I look in the mirror at myself, I'll say, okay, I was 202 at weigh-ins. I was probably 208 on stage, and I'm probably back up to like 216 right now. I'd say I'm probably not over 220, but I'm probably going to approach 220 pretty soon now.
Right on. Hey, you know what? I had one more question that we had a bunch, and of course we only have time for so much. So I apologize to anybody who had written in that we didn't get to cover your questions, but there was one in particular a while back. You guys had spoke about experimenting with melanotan 2 as a insulin sensitivity drug. Did you guys end up figuring anything out with that? And if so, what did you see?
So the funny thing is, sometimes Trevor, I realize that Trevor's often right, but I give him such a hard time, and we'll spend hours debating things, and then I'll do a whole bunch of research, and I'll end up with the same conclusion, and I'll say, well, I could have just accepted what Trevor said as true. So melanotan is one of those ones where I'm saying, all right, Trevor, I'm just going to accept what you're saying is true. I'm just going to run a low dose of melanotan frequently because I see he does. He runs a low dose of melanotan, and if his opinion is if he's going out of his way enough to inject melanotan, even though he doesn't even really want it to get tan, just for the insulin sensitivity, then I'll do it too. But I'll let him talk about if there what science he has behind it and what the studies he read was.
Yeah, the melanotan actually directly does, and it does this probably one of the best levels, because my biggest thing when I found out about it, I'm trying to think why, were they giving these rats melanotan that it was making them sick and they don't want to eat, because you do get that side effect, that toxic release in your body from melanotan that's not really good for you. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's because these rats are getting sick and they're not going to eat. And that was the same with me. I would sometimes, if I took too much, I got sick and didn't want to eat. So I kind of left it at that. I didn't really care about it. And then when I found out what receptor they're talking about for the insulin sensitivity, it made sense. It's talking more at a genetic level, like dealing with leptin and things like that. It's really just increasing it in a genetic level. So
interesting.
It 100% does work. And the problem is, like, I have to take such little doses, and I stopped taking it for a long time because of the tanning effect. I don't want to look like that and have that dark look and the eye bags and stuff. But if you add it, adding it once in a while, when you get to a certain tan point and then stop doing it, just by doing that, and almost like that control delete switch and changing your sensitivity to insulin, because it's not like it's just when you're on it, it'll stay with you. So then you're kind of like resetting that control delete, similar to DMP, to where once you do it, you reset it, your body's going to have to wear down the insulin sensitivity all over again, kind of deal. So it's a quicker way if you were to come off a really bad, a lot of these guys do these dirty bulks and nasty things like that, to come off of that, do some type of metformin and melanotan things and get your insulin sensitivity back to par before doing anything else. Would be a great way.
Hell yeah.
So Scott, I don't know exactly what fixed my insulin sensitivity since I started experimenting. I've always been experimenting, but a lot more in the last year. But I've noticed a huge difference in when I used to eat anything with carbs, I'd gain fat really easily. And now I can be a lot more flexible on my diet and still not get fat. There's still certain things like cereal that seems to just put the fat on instantly.
It's so delicious, though.
Yeah, but now I can eat like a hamburger, and the bread from the hamburger and the ketchup and stuff like that doesn't seem to hit and turn me fat immediately. So melanotan may have something to do with that. The DNP is definitely something that I run to reset my insulin sensitivity every once in a while. And then, throwing in the cardarine and a whole bunch of other, can't even remember, slim pills with the berberine, a whole bunch of other things like that. I don't know which one of them's working, because insulin sensitivity is kind of a hard thing unless you just ran one compound to test it. And even in a human, it would be hard to tell for sure. It would take time. But melanotan may be a part of what has helped my insulin sensitivity. Okay,
interesting. It's something that I hadn't heard really anybody else talking about. So I definitely wanted to try to squeeze that question in at the end here. I would ask what you guys are doing for the evening, but I think that I don't even want to know.
We might show a little bit of it on Snapchat, although I've been good on Snapchat because my baby mama and I are going through some tough times right now, and I don't want to stress her out too much showing her too many girls. I might show some glimpses.
Trevor, wish you could have made it out to the Arnold. I got a chance to meet Tony and his daughter. It was great to meet you out there.
Oh yeah, man. Anytime you're out one of those, I had no idea. I know there's so many people and things that go on at those meets.
I'll pull Trevor to more expos. I had a really fun time at the Arnold, so I'm sold. I'll come to the Arnold again, and we're gonna go to Olympia.
All right. Well, I'm considering the Olympia, and I'll probably be at Junior Nationals too if you guys make it out that way.
Oh yeah, I'll be at both, I believe.
Excellent.
We'll see about Junior.
Okay, cool. Well, I'd definitely like to hook up with you, meet up with both you guys again in person. I really appreciate your time. Of course, we already talked about enhancedathlete.com. Where can everybody else go to find out more?
Enhanced Athlete Facebook page, Enhanced Athlete Instagram, and most of what we do is the YouTube channel, Enhanced Athlete, and Snapchat for behind the scenes if anybody cares to see the personal life.
Awesome. Well, you guys enjoy your time down there in Costa Rica, and I hope that you have a nice trip home wherever next is. I'm sure you've got somewhere else coming up right after that, so I won't even get into that. That'd be like the next 30 minutes.
Okay.
For Advices Radio, I'm Scott McNally with Coach Trevor and Tony Hughes. We're out of here, guys.
Blue jeans, I'm faded, minding my own data, smoking on that strong, that Arnold Schwarzenegger. Potentially you bitch, you hot as an igloo. Kick back on that Glock, call that jujitsu. Hello, running with a yellow girl, number 2 pencil. These rappers is washed up, spin cycle, rinse you, my nigga. All day, all night, half pipe. I dive in that pussy, yeah, I belly flop, I jackknife and shit. Tell my homies that I say it's a party. Yeah, got that tech for technical difficulties. I'm top dog, you top ramen, I'm top dog. Pyru, gangsters,